In this video, I'd like to show you how you can be selective or not selective about whether you get people's house size information, house height information, number of stories, and or basement information, depending on your settings and the settings of the module for which the bid is being given. So what I'd like to do is first of all start out by showing you here in the smart form an example of a time when you would need to know the size of the house. So in the case of a roof cleaning, it would be important to know how many stories the house is, whether or not they have a basement, certainly if it was a walkout basement, and the number of square feet of the house. The module requires that information and uses it to calculate the price. But in other situations, like maybe the lawn care, we're not too concerned about things like number of stories, the size of the house, or whether or not it has a basement. So how did we take care of that setting and knowing whether or not we're going to ask for that information? If you go to the settings, you can go over to the form builder, and in the form builder you'll notice in the general data collection area, one of the options that you have is to select this button, and it has three options. Number one is to always ask. That would mean that it's not required if the module doesn't require it, but it will still put it on the page for the customer to enter. Only if required is the setting we just looked at. If you had roof cleaning and you needed to know that information because the module requires it, then by all means it's going to ask that. But if it's always required, that means that regardless of whether it's lawn care or roof cleaning, the customer must give you the information about the number of stories, the size of the house, and whether or not there's a basement. Now, how would we know? I'm going to click save here in order to lock in what we have here. I'm going to save it the way it was. Now, you may ask yourself, how do I know if something is required for a module? Well, certainly in the roof cleaning area, you'll notice that in step 2, we're using the information of building square footage and we're using access charges. And when you look at the pricing, you'll notice that we're assigning a price to the square footage of the building. You can see that we've got commercial pricing disabled, so there's no pricing necessary there. But again, for access charges, we need to know if there's a basement so we can assign pricing, and we need to know if there's any other stories so we can ask above ground pricing. Now, if you wanted to turn it off and you didn't want the basement question because it's not relevant, all you have to do is either make sure that every setting that would be interested in basement information, all the way down for each and every size, is set to 0, or it's set to ignore. If you set it to ignore or you set it to 0, ResponsiBid will be smart enough to figure out that you don't require basement information. Or another way to do it would be that if you truly don't care about the access charges of the house and you're not going to charge based on number of stories, then simply disabling that feature would also make it so that ResponsiBid understands that you don't need to collect that information. But if mathematically, in order to calculate the price, it does become a required piece of information based off of the way your pricing is set up, ResponsiBid will require that information every time. So that's how you would be able to calculate or determine whether or not you're going to require house height, house size, or whether or not there's a basement.